All right, let's do a little bit of a recap from last night, and then we'll move on, of course, to our topic for today. So last night, our topic was know your team. Okay, so we talked about sports in general and how they correlate with life, how they can correlate with our Christian walk and faith. So we had a lot to talk about there, of course. And I shared with you all that for my kiddos, it's going to be a requirement that they play some kind of sport. I shared why that is a thing for us. And it's mainly the things that sports teach us, right? Or that help teach us. It's not that that's the only avenue to learn these things, of course. But a lot of times it's much easier to learn something when you have it in front of you. You have something to, I hate to use a pun, but practice on, right? And you have, it's fun usually, right? We usually learn better when we're having more fun and our brain is engaged. So some of the things that we talked about that sports teach that I'm a big proponent of course, is toughness and teamwork, willingness to have to sacrifice for a goal, being coachable or teachable, right? These are all good characteristics that just in general in life, right, we should strive for. But also the Bible teaches us to be those things, right? To have those things and to, of course, rely on God and the Holy Spirit for those things as well. And so we talked about how sports are mentioned in the Bible. We played a game, of course, and then our main part of the lesson was talking about the tax question that the Pharisees brought to Jesus, and they were trying to entrap him and basically make him pick a side, and in doing so, get the other side to turn against him, right? They were trying to make him pick a team, if you will, all in knowing that whichever way he went, or at least in their minds, it was going to be a trap. And, of course, Jesus turns that back on them. And so our main point of our lesson yesterday was know your team. And the way Jesus said that was give to Caesar the things that are Caesar's and give to God the things that are God's. And the way they identified what was Caesar's was, okay, if it's got Caesar's image on it, it must belong to Caesar. So we're going to give the things to Caesar that belong to him. And we have the image of God. So if we bear the image of God, then we must belong to God, and we must give ourselves back to him, right? So that was the main premise of our lesson yesterday, knowing your team. Tonight we're going to talk about being a role player, okay? So what is a role player? It can be a lot of things. It really can. It depends on the sport that you're talking about, and depends on the positions within that sport that you're talking about. But I think it's safe to say the easiest definition that I can give for what is a role player, the opposite of the superstar, right? That's usually how we refer to good players or productive players or important players, but they're just simply not the best or the superstar. Or if you and I were having a conversation about the game that happened last night, this person's name is probably not the first one that's going to come up in our conversation, right? But they're that player that is important. And eventually, if you talk about that game long enough, or you talk to somebody that knows the game very well, then they're probably quickly going to mention this player, because everybody understands the importance of good role players, people who understand the fundamentals of whatever sport it is that we're competing in and that we're playing. So, if I were to ask you, what are some role players in sports? What are some role players that you think of? And you can just shout them out. It can be any sport. What's a role player that you think of? A position or a player, either or. What's that? Okay. Free safety. That's a good position. Yep. Oh, Scotty. So, one of the first people that I think of course, is a basketball player. I played basketball, as we mentioned yesterday. That's kind of my sport. Oh, Dennis Rodman. Never thought I'd be giving a Christian lesson and mentioning that name, but here we are, okay? Oh, Dennis Rodman. So he played with some of the other people that we mentioned here, and to me, he is the essential definition of a role player. Now, he's not the only one. There are a lot of other people who made a really good career out of being a role player. Now, Dennis Rodman, when he first started, was not necessarily a role player. If I'm not mistaken, he was on the Pistons to begin with, and he was one of their stars, right? He was one of their young, talented superstars that they were hoping would be like a lot of these other people, right? These other superstars. And his career went on for a little while, of course, and then Michael Jordan, of all people, fought hard to get Dennis Rodman to come over to the Bulls. And a lot of people question that. Why in the world? Because Dennis Rodman, for those that know, is a character, okay? Not the first person I would mention if I was trying to name some role models for kids to look up to, right? Not the first person I'm going to be calling upon. And so he had baggage that went with him. He was crazy. He really was. And that helped him, unfortunately, with being a good role player and a good basketball player, and it didn't quite help him off the court. But Michael Jordan fought really hard to get him to come to his team. And he had to fight against his coach, the administration there for the team, because they really did not want him. They did not want all the extra things that came along with this guy. And basically it came down to Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen told them, hey, you worry about coaching him, we'll worry about everything else. We'll take care, we'll keep him in line. And they somewhat did. He was still out there at times. But I do have some highlights that I want to pull up and just kind of give you an idea of what we mean by a role player, right? If you look, and I was hoping to do this, and I just didn't have the time, unfortunately, to sit down and do all the in-depth research that I would have to do to be able to present it to you in a nice, easy format. But what I was going to try to do was pull up some games where these superstars, and there's a lot of them, where they have 50, 60, 70 points by themselves in a basketball game. And you think, my gracious, there's no way they lost that game. Yeah, they did. They lost that game. Their team did not win that game because the other team, they had their players and they had their better role players, and the team with the superstar, all they really had was the superstar. They didn't really have much to go along with it. So I don't know if we're going to be able to get those pulled over. Dennis Rodman. And it's a role player when the first thing when you Google and you search for Dennis Rodman, the first thing that comes up is not scoring. It's not any of that. It's defense and rebounding. That's the name of the highlight reel, that the very first one that will pull up. And so what this shows is a bunch of really just him rebounding and doing all the little things in a basketball game that will win you a game. It just will not be the flashy thing. It will not be what's on the stats that everybody's talking about the next day. You all know I'm a big Tennessee fan, and I'm going to mention a name, basketball player that played here recently for the university. He's graduated now. Most of you probably will not even recognize his name. If you watched a lot of the games, you will. But if you are a casual viewer, you will not know that Jordan Gainey played for the University of Tennessee. Probably don't know some of you don't know his name. And that's fine. But there is a metric that we like stats, right? We like something concrete that we can look at, that we can point to. Points, rebounds, turnovers, assists, all those are what we would call stats, right? And so we like having these things we can point to and say, if you do this in these categories, then you'll more than likely win the game. And that is true, right? Less turnovers, more assists, all the more rebounds, you're probably going to win that game. Excuse me. And there is a stat out there that tries to capture all the other things that you can't put into a stat. And I don't have the first clue how they try to calculate this or what it is. It takes all the stats and kinds of combines them, but it does a bunch of stuff. And it's called, basically it's called that plus or minus. It's like the SP, some kind of stat. But basically you want a good number, right? You want a high number. That means when you're on the floor, your team is succeeding more than when you're off the floor. And so they compare that, and Jordan Gainey was one of our role players for our team, And when he was on the floor, our team succeeded a whole lot more. Our scores scored more. Our defense was more effective. Our rebounding was more effective. He was not a big man, right? He was not. I mean, he had his games where he scored. He actually had at least one game winner that I can think of, maybe two. So he had his ability to step out and do some of those things, but that was not his role. His role was to be that role player, that glue guy that comes in and makes everybody else better. And that's kind of what that stat tries to calculate, and it's very hard. And sometimes you look at that stat and you're like, man, the best player on the team didn't really have a great plus or minus. Well, it takes into account all the missed shots that you had too, and all the turnovers that you had, right? And the more you touch a basketball, of course, the more you shoot a basketball, guess what? Probably more turnovers you're going to have, and more missed shots you're going to have. It's just natural. And so a lot of times your superstars will not have a very high score in this, and it's because they're taking more of the shots. They're doing a lot of the scoring side of things, and it's more favorable to kind of those role players. And Jordan Gainey was one of those that had a super high score in this metric, and every time he was on the floor, when he got his minutes, we more than not, at a very high clip, we won that basketball game. But when he's on the bench and not playing, you can go look at those games, and we probably didn't win that game, or it was a very tight and close game. And so he would be a great definition as well of what I would call a role player. He wasn't a starter always. He was a lot of times one of the first ones off the bench. And a lot of times if you look at the stats, there were games where he had a lot of points, but there was a lot of games where he was kind of buried down the depth of that. But still, he had an effect on the game. Every time he got out there, he had an effect. Do you think we'll be able to get that to play, Jody? Okay. So we're not going to, so Jody, you can mute it, of course. We don't need the sound or anything. So you can go ahead and play it whenever you can. So this is Dennis Rodman. For those that don't know, you can see a lot of hustle, a lot of heart. Wasn't scared to guard anybody or the best players. You'll see that he has some highlights here, of course, with the Pistons, and then he'll have a lot of highlights, of course, with the Bulls. He was a part of the Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen era there where they won a lot of games, and he just 100% knows where the players are. He's a good passer, good rebounder. He can go and score when he needed to, but look how he just always is laying his body out 100%, right? And when you're a coach and you're watching a player like this, that's one of the first ones you're like, give me that guy. I can find somebody that can score a lot of times. I can find somebody that's maybe tall or big. It's hard to find somebody that has that heart and that want to and not scared of anything, right? And Rodman here, 6'7". Now, for us, that's tall. For the NBA, that's not tall. That is far from being tall, right? But you look at where a lot of these highlights are is in and around the rim, right? He played so much bigger and taller than he actually was, and he played against a lot of these bigger and taller guys and stronger guys a lot of times, but you would have never known it by watching him play just because of how aggressive he was. And now one thing he did have going for him, of course, as you can tell, very athletic, right? He was in the NBA for a reason. The dude was not a bum, right? So we're not talking about somebody they just picked up off the street and said, hey, here, go do the best you can. No, he's a very talented player. But when you get him in amongst all these other talented players, his talent was not as great as theirs. But one thing that he did do was he knew his role. He knew what he had to do and where he needed to be, and that's what he was there for. And he didn't try to get outside of that role, right? He didn't try to go do something else that wasn't him, okay? And we watch that in sports a lot of times, and we'll see when players try to do more than what they are capable of doing or more than what their team needs them to do, right? Sometimes it's like, hey, we've got this over here. We need you to be over here to do this. This is what's going to make us successful. We don't need you coming over into somebody else's role or somebody else's spot. So y'all can go ahead and pause that. Thank y'all very much for working to get that up. So, yeah, like I said, never thought in a million years I'd be showing some Dennis Rodman highlights here, but I guess it fit for today. And one thing for Craig, and I talk about him, so for those that don't know, Craig's wife had a very serious accident. She's down in Atlanta getting some therapy right now, so please continue to pray for them. I've been talking to him, of course, on and off. We were talking there for every day, but now that they're down there heavy into the therapies, it's hard to communicate on a daily basis. But I was talking to Craig either yesterday or I think it was yesterday or the day before, and of course, you could tell Craig's not going to say it, but I could tell. He's starting to get tired, of course. It's starting to wear on him. Things are looking pretty good, of course, and things are progressing, and that's great. But obviously, it's been a long road already, and they still have a long way to go. So continue to pray for them and be with them. But one of Craig's favorite stories, he and I coach together a lot, and we always have our, how coaches are. They have their stories they like to tell, especially at the beginning of the season, right? And so anytime we go to have a AAU year, one of the first stories that he tells is the story that the conversation he had with Coach Sullivan when he decided he wanted to play basketball. And so, of course, he likes to tell it to get a jab at me. That's all of his stories are a jab at me usually. But he decided pretty late in his high school days, middle school, high school, that he wanted to start playing basketball. So most of us, when we were in elementary and middle school, we played, of course, growing up. And Craig didn't do any of that. Craig didn't have an interest in basketball until he got, I think, a freshman in high school. And he tried to play that year. It didn't work out. So I'm pretty sure, if I'm not wrong, his first year playing was his sophomore year of high school. So that's pretty late for most high school athletes to begin playing a sport. And so he went and it was Coach Sullivan's so it would have been, Coach Sullivan would have come in his freshman year. It was my 8th grade year. And so at the end of that year, he had a conversation with Coach Sullivan and said, hey, I want to try out for the team next year. And Coach Sullivan had a frank conversation with him. And this is where the jab comes in at me. But he's like, hey, we've got a pretty good post player. I don't need you to come in here and be an all-star. He's like, but I need somebody that will rebound. I need somebody that will play some defense, because apparently I didn't know how to play defense if you talk to Coach Sullivan or Craig or any of them. Craig's stories, I love them, because every time there's this one player that I let have a career day when I was playing against him, and the amount of points that kid scored that night goes up every single time Craig tells a story. It started out, he scored 18, then it's 20-something, then it's 30. Now if you talk to him, he probably scored 50 that night on the floor. And that gets me playing time, and that gets us to win ball games, right? And that's what his mindset and focus was on. So how am I going to tie all this in? Well, let's go to Matthew chapter 5, verse 13 and 14. So when I thought about role players, I immediately thought about this piece of Scripture. And if there is anything that I say tonight that you enjoy and that you like, I can promise you I did not come up with any of this, okay? But I heard a lesson over this that went really in depth, and I hope to bring out a lot of those points tonight. And when I started thinking about that lesson, my brain went back to that lesson immediately. And so our main scripture for tonight is going to be Matthew chapter 5, 13 and 14. So you are the salt of the earth, but if the salt should lose its taste, how can it be made salty? It's no longer good for anything but to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. Verse 14, you are the light of the world. A city situated on a hill cannot be hidden. So we're going to break this down a little bit. We're going to talk about salt. We're going to talk about light. And we're going to talk about why Jesus said we are the salt. That's a pretty interesting thing to tell somebody, to try to compliment them or to show them that you have a serious role to play, is to use a seasoning, right? The guy on the lesson that I was listening to, he said, it's kind of like telling somebody, you're the oregano of the world. And it's like, what does that even mean, right? We have no context for that, and it kind of sounds pretty silly when we say it that way. But this is a very deep and profound thing that Jesus is telling us, And a lot of it has to do, of course, with the characteristics and properties of salt and of light. So, like I mentioned yesterday, there is an importance to salt in the ancient world, and we're going to talk about some of those things. Roman soldiers, it's kind of wishy-washy on what you look at as to exactly what it meant, whether they were paid with salt or were given a salt stipend to buy salt, like it was specific money. Hey, we're giving you this money exactly for this salt. But either way, that is where we get the word salary from, right? It comes from those origins. And so that goes to show you that it was a pretty important commodity back in ancient times if it's a part of somebody's salary. It's a part of how somebody is paid for the work that they are doing, right? And so what are some of the things that we think of with salt? Well, the first thing that I think of is it enhances flavor. It's pretty easy to tell when something doesn't have salt on it, right? But you think about a steak. You take the best steak in the world, the best cut of steak, cooked to perfection, which is not well done, by the way, but cooked to perfection, and you throw some salt on it. What does it do? Makes it better, right? Makes it so much better. It brings out that savory flavor of the steak, right? Now, do you taste the salt? Yes, but you really are tasting the enhanced flavor of the meat that it's on, right? And so when you get done eating that steak, do you say, oh, man, that salt tasted so good? No, unless you're Miss Sally or Whitney who likes salt. No, you probably say, no, that steak tasted good, right? That was a really good steak. You don't compliment the salt, but it was the steak, it was the meat that you put it on that the flavor was brought out of. And think about chocolate. Chocolate, you put salt on chocolate, guess what? It brings out the sweetness of that chocolate. It makes it even better. Now, this one may be a little unique to the South, but for us, we like to put salt on our apples and on our fruit, right? Because, again, it brings out the flavor of that food that you're eating, okay? It also reduces bitterness. Think about coffee. A lot of people put salt in their coffee because it reduces the bitterness of the coffee. And again, going back to chocolate, especially when you have dark chocolate, there's a reason when you go to the grocery store and you're looking for chocolate that has salt in it, a lot of times it's a dark chocolate that has the salt in it because it is a more bitter chocolate, and when you put that salt in there, it helps cut a little bit of that bitterness and it makes it more sweet, more like the milk chocolates and other things that people enjoy. So it helps to reduce bitterness. And then it's an antiseptic. So they used it for a lot of medicine purposes back in the ancient times, in times of Jesus, of course. And it's still used as an antiseptic for today as well. But one of the biggest things that made it valuable, especially in those days, was for its preservation, or it's a preservative, right? It has those properties. We are very blessed to have refrigeration and ways to keep our food either cool or frozen, right? And it preserves the life of that food. Well, they did not have that back then, right? So you think about when they went to kill an animal out of their herd. Most of the time, that was going to provide more meat than they needed for that day. That's a lot of times why they would throw a big party if they did kill a fattened calf or something like that, because they needed people to come and help eat that food. Otherwise, they were going to have to find a way to try to preserve it. It was too much for them to eat just their own family or whatever. And so for food, they would pack the meat in this salt to prevent the decay, right? To preserve that food and so that they can enjoy it longer than just 1 day or 2 days at most, and especially in their climate. You think about somebody who is in a more northern climate where there is snow and all that. Well, guess what? You can use the snow and the natural temperature outside to preserve your food. You think about people up in like Canada and Alaska and even higher. there's really not a whole lot of need for refrigeration up there because you can use your natural elements to help with that, of course. You can make your own ice boxes or coolers or whatever you want out of snow and ice and that kind of stuff outside. But in the Middle East climate, snow was not a thing, right? It's always warm. And so you talk about that climate, there's even more of a need for preservation there than there is in some other climates as well. So how can we apply this when Jesus says that you are the salt of the earth? How can we apply that? What does that look like for us? Well, we go back to these characteristics that we're talking about, and Jesus is trying to tell us exactly how we fit in here. So let's go back to the flavor, enhancing flavor. So we, as Christians, are to make things even better. Our presence is to make things better. It's to bring value and to enhance the flavor of that moment. And you think about the big moments of someone's life and the people that are there. The people that are there are probably there because they are bringing flavor. They're enhancing the flavor in good times and in bad times. You think about wedding days, the people that you're inviting to your wedding. That's your family, that's your friends, that's the people that should be bringing value to your life that are important to you, right? You think about your birthdays and your special holidays and the people that you're choosing to spend your time with. Those are probably people who are enhancing our lives, who are bringing more value to it. And you think about the bad times when we have deaths. The people that we want around us in those moments are the people who are bringing value. Now, the value in that moment is not a joyful value. It's not a yip, yip, hooray value, but it's a calming value. It's a peaceful value. It's a loving value, right? And as Christians, we are to be enhancers of flavor. When we are in a moment, whether it's with fellow believers or unbelievers, we are to enhance the flavor. And that's the question that we have to ask ourselves a lot of times is, if you want to ask yourself, am I being a good Christian? Am I living the Bible as it was taught? And one of our favorite artists is Josiah Queen. He's got a song. It's one of Brittany's favorites. I can't remember exactly the words, so forgive me if I get them halfway wrong here. But we've all heard the statement, sometimes you're the only Bible that someone will read, right? Well, he takes that a step further in his song and his lyrics, and he says, if I'm going to be the only Bible that some people read, will they read the words that you wrote? So that means not only am I a picture of the Bible, but am I a true picture of the Bible? Am I a true representation of what Jesus wrote and taught and the Holy Spirit wrote and taught through others? And so our presence should enhance flavor. Our presence should also reduce bitterness as well. The Bible talks a lot of times about how as Christians we are not to stir up strife or to stir up anger or to stir up jealousy, but we are to be a counter to those things, right? We are to reduce that bitterness and those things that are not good for us. And it's not our job to transform. When you throw salt on a steak, are you trying to transform that steak into something else? I'm not. There's a reason I want to eat that steak because it's yummy. It may not be good for me, but it's tasty. That's what I want. I want that steak. I don't want it to be something else, right? So when we are talking about our walk and us as Christians, it's not our job to transform things into what they're not. It's our job to either enhance the fruits of the Spirit, the Beatitudes, or to reduce the things, the bitterness of this world, such as jealousy and envy and strife and anger. So our presence should bring more beauty and more flavor to things, not necessarily for us to transform. And our lives should serve to bring out the best in other people. You think about the people that you enjoy being around. Take a second just to think about those individuals. Who do you enjoy being around? Who do you enjoy having conversations with, spending time with? There's a good possibility that the reason you enjoy that is because they bring out the best in you. Yeah, I'll take one. Thank you. So they are bringing out the best. So if we have those people that we enjoy being around because they bring out the best in us, are we doing that for others? Are we that person for other people that brings out the best in them? Are we the salt in their life? And going back to food, of course, like I mentioned earlier, we know when salt is missing. When you eat something, you're like, that could use a little salt, right? We need a little something extra on top of that, right? So taking that same premise, is our presence noticeable when it is there and when it isn't there? As salt, we know when it is there and we know when it isn't there. We can taste it. We know for sure that, hey, that food could use a little bit more. Now, some of us, we might like our salt a little bit more than others, but regardless, we all know when it's missing, right? And we should also have that same effect with our presence. When our presence is there, there's a beautification there. There's a enhancing there. And when there's not, it's missed, right? And it's not because of us. It's not about us, but it's the salt, if you will, that God put into us, right? The Holy Spirit that is living through us, the light of God and the light of Jesus that is shining through us. It's not about us, but it's what comes with us, right, when we are in these moments. And let's go back and talk about the antiseptic properties for a second. What's the first thing people tell you when you tell them you have a sore throat? Gargle salt water, right? Still to this day, it's one of the easiest, best solutions to a sore throat, right? For me, I kind of cheat a little bit. I don't do the salt water. I go and get me a pack of sunflower seeds. So when my throat is hurting, I'll eat a bunch of sunflower seeds. I have no idea if that helps or not, but it makes logical sense to me. There's salt on the sunflower seeds. I like to eat sunflower seeds. Makes sense. Yeah, I don't know if it actually works, but hey, it works in my mind, right? And so what does that mean for us as Christians? Well, it means that we should go to the areas of culture that are infected and decaying and bring about healing. Just like the salt is an antiseptic for wounds, for a sore throat, for whatever it might be. In the Old Testament, it mentions it, and in a lot of ancient manuscripts about birthing and babies, one of the things they do is they'll put salt and honey together, and they'll rub down the baby to clean the baby after it's born, and then wash it off, right? And that was something that went for centuries and centuries as a practice that was done. It had medical and cultural and spiritual things behind it as well. But we should go to the areas that need healing, right? And you think about, I'm not a big political person, so I try not to get involved in all that. It doesn't really interest me a whole lot. But there are things about politics that is a part of the world that we live in. And for me, one of the things that's an easy thing to point to is as Christians, there are certain things that we should be standing up for and against as well. You think about all the abortions that happen every day and all year. That's something that as Christians we should be able to stand up and be an antiseptic for and say that is not what is going to be, one, productive for us as a society, but two, it's not pleasing to our Heavenly Father either, or a cultural way of life that we should accept. We should be going to areas like that and bringing healing into those areas. And you think about a preservative. If it's applied before infection or decay, then it will sustain it from occurring. And so again, you think about our communities, you think about the places that we live in. Just because there isn't infection or decay doesn't mean as Christians we don't have a purpose and a plan to prevent that, right? As we live and we interact with people and we live in these communities that we are in, we are to preserve them. with the way that we live our lives, the way we treat other people, the way we interact with other people. And this is one of the best things I thought that was brought out in this little lesson that I listened to, is you think about salt. What's another characteristic of salt that I never really thought about, and especially not in this context, but it makes you thirsty. Salt is thirst-inducing. You think about a horse. You let a horse lick on a salt tab for a little while, guess what? It's going to lead you to some water because it's going to go find water, right? And this is actually a practice that has been used, not with horses necessarily, but with other animals, even in like places where water is not readily available. You capture an animal and you give it food, salty food, or you give it something that's going to make it thirsty, and then you tie something to it and you let it go, and guess what? It's going to lead you to water because that's the first place it wants to go, is go get water, right? And so as salt is thirst-inducing, does our presence make people thirsty for the living water? Pull up John 4:14 for me. I did not give them the rest of these scriptures, so it may take them a second to pull them up. But John 4:14. And this is Jesus speaking here. But whosoever drinketh of the water that I shall give him shall never thirst. But the water that I shall give him shall be in him as a well of water springing up into everlasting life. Go to John chapter 6, verse 35 for me as well, please. 6:35. And Jesus said unto them, I am the bread of life. He that cometh to me shall never hunger, and he that believeth on me shall never thirst. So does our presence make somebody realize that they're thirsty? Because we're all thirsty. We all are thirsting for the everlasting water that Jesus provides. Well, a lot of people don't know that's what they're thirsting for. But in our presence, as we are interacting with people, do we make them think, I need what they've got? Make them thirst for what it is that we have inside of us. There's a difference. There's something going on here that's different, and they are recognizing their need for water. And, of course, the true source of everlasting water, which is Jesus. Now, the New Testament isn't the only place that salt is mentioned. Salt is mentioned throughout the Bible. One of the biggest things in the Old Testament that mentions salt is several times when a covenant is made between God and Israel, it is called a covenant of salt. And the reason it is called a covenant of salt is because, again, they understood all the properties of salt and what that meant to them and how important that commodity was for them. And so they knew when they said, this is a covenant of salt, they were recognizing that, hey, this covenant is between us and God. It's not a covenant between man and man. It's a covenant between man and God, and this covenant will endure. This covenant will preserve. It's not going to decay. It's not going to grow old and die, right? This is an enduring covenant, and when they called it a covenant of salt, that's what they were recognizing. That's what they were saying when they said that. And then in Leviticus, it talks about when they are sacrificing, they are to add salt to their sacrifices. And the reason they would do that is because salt is a fire retardant. It does not burn very easily. And there's actually a little thing I thought about doing today, but you can take a piece of paper like a coffee strainer or whatever, filter, you can put salt in the middle of it, light it on fire, and it will burn all around the salt, but it won't burn where the salt is. It stops at the salt. And I thought about doing that today, but I just didn't get all that together. So by adding the salt to the sacrifice, it made that sacrifice last longer. So when I am smoking meat, and sometimes if you ever hear me say, hey, I was smoking, it's meat, okay? A lot of times I forget to add that little extra part in there because I don't think nothing about it. And I've had people say, I didn't know you smoked. I'm like, what? yeah, I smoke meat. And they're like, oh, I'm like, oh, no, never mind. So, yeah, I like to smoke meat. But one of the things when you're smoking meat is there are certain seasonings that will burn. And so you got to be very careful at what temperatures you smoke at and how long, because if you do it for too long, it's not the meat that's burning or burning up. It's actually the seasonings that you put on it. So pepper, one of my favorite seasonings, is one that will burn. And so the more you put on there, the more you have to watch your temps to make sure they don't get too high. And so a lot of times when you like have a brisket or a pulled pork, a Boston butt, and you see the outside it looks burnt, it's actually the seasonings and the peppers that have kind of, cooked up. And you just got to make sure you do them at the right temperature, or they will burn. But if you add salt to that meat, and a lot of it, and that's why a lot of times smoked meat is pretty salty, is because that salt is used to help make sure while you're cooking it, it's not overcooking, it's not burning up on the outside. And so in the Old Testament, in Leviticus, they would add salt to their sacrifices to make that sacrifice last longer, and it wouldn't just go up in flames, but it would be as the Bible often refers to, as a sweet aroma unto God. Those sacrifices, it would allow those sacrifices to slowly burn instead of quickly burn. And let's go to Colossians chapter 4, verse 6, please. Colossians 4:6. And here's another mention of salt in the New Testament. Let your speech be always with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer every man. So what is that trying to tell us? Well, again, going back to the characteristics of salt, is our conversations, is our words, are they life-bringing? Are they enhancing flavor? Are they reducing bitterness? Are they antiseptic? Are they preservatives, right? Or are they the opposite of that? Okay? And so what this is telling us here is as we are speaking and interacting with people, we are to season our words with salt. The things that Jesus, especially in the Sermon on the Mount, which is where we found you are the salt of the earth and you are the light of the world, where he is teaching us these things. It's to not only be for us to take in, but it's also for us to give out as well. And one way that we give it out is through our speech. Now, there is a bad characteristic of salt as well. And no, I'm not talking about cholesterol. The bad thing about salt is it can prevent life. So one of the things that ancient cultures would do, especially when they conquered another nation, is after they conquered that nation, if they had no intentions of inhabiting that nation, they just wanted to wipe them out, be done with them, and then move on either to another nation or back to their own. What they would do a lot of times is they would take salt and they would throw it out in the fields. And they would trample it into the ground in their farm fields. And what that did is you can no longer grow anything in that field. It will not grow. Any ground that has too much salt is not going to grow or be productive. And so when Jesus, going back, if you'll go back to Matthew 5:13 for me, please, sir. This is where this other part of the scripture comes in, where he says, but if the salt has lost its savor or flavor, wherewith shall it be salted? It's good for nothing but to cast out and to be trodden underfoot. And what that is referencing is these nations, as they conquered other nations, destroying their ability to produce food, their ability to survive in that area anymore, which means if there is anybody remaining, they can't remain there. If they want food, they're going to have to relocate and go somewhere else, right? And so what is this application to us? What does this mean to us? Well, what it's telling us is whether you want to be salt or not, if you claim to be a Christian and you are a follower of Christ, you are salt. And you're either going to be the good qualities of salt or you're going to be the bad quality of salt. And the bad quality is if we proclaim to be salt, followers of Christ, but we have no fruits of the Spirit or the Beatitudes, then we are not enhancing flavor, reducing bitterness, preserving, being antiseptic. We are actually preventing life. We are preventing others from finding what it is that they are truly thirsting for, because they look at us and they say, you know what, I'm thirsty, but I don't want what they've got. I'll try and find it somewhere else, right? And in that manner, we are preventing life, okay? And then people will thirst for something else. They will go and try to find it somewhere else. And so the application for us here is, when you decide to be a Christian, you decide to follow Jesus, you become salt. And if we are true believers and true followers and we try, it doesn't mean we're not going to mess up. We're going to mess up. But when we commit ourselves to the teachings of God and interacting with people in the fruits of the Spirit and with the Beatitudes, which are immediately before this part of the sermon. So if you go back just a couple verses, you will see the Beatitudes starting in verse 3, okay? Which is, blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are those who are mourn, blessed those who are humble, who hunger and thirst for righteousness, blessed are the merciful, pure in heart, the peacemakers, blessed those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, okay? So if we do not have these things, or we do not have these attitudes about us, and we're not striving to do the things that Jesus did and taught, then unfortunately we're going to have the opposite effect of salt, or the bad effect of salt. And that's going to be preventing life, unfortunately. All right, let's go to light of the world on verse 14. So we're going to go back to verse 14 of that chapter there, 5. You are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. So this is very much like the salt, okay, but it is a little bit different, okay. It's got some different characteristics, right? You think about light. Light can actually be measured. There are light waves. Now, we cannot see them. They are invisible to us. We have to have some type of instrument to help us to see the light waves, but they are there, right? And it can be felt. If a light is big enough and bright enough, what are you going to feel from it? You're going to feel heat, right? You're going to feel the heat coming off of that light, right? But all in all, it is invisible. And you think about, go to John chapter 8, verse 12 for me, please. John 8:12. Not only does Jesus say we are the light of the world, but he says he is the light, and then God is also referenced as the light as well. And it says here, then spake Jesus again to them, saying, I am the light of the world. He that followeth me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life. And then one more, go back, or actually, no, that's good. That's the only other one there. So you think about light. What does light do? Well, the best way I can describe it and talk about it is it brings wisdom. Light brings wisdom. You think about moments of darkness. Guess what we are in that moment? We're ignorant of what's around us. We don't know. It could be something good. There could be 100, if we turned off the lights and it was completely dark outside and we couldn't see anything, there could be some really good things in here. There could be a $100 bill laying right there with my name on it, right? But I wouldn't see it. I wouldn't know it was there. But there also could be a dog on this side of me that's ready to bite me. Now, obviously, you're probably going to hear the dog as well, but I'm not going to see it. I'm not going to know that danger is there. I think Tasha and them did a wonderful job with all these decorations that we have for Vacation Bible School. We only see them because of the light. And we only know that they're there because of the light. If you walked into this building and there was complete darkness, these things would still be beautiful, and they'd be nice, and they'd be cool, but we wouldn't know it. We wouldn't be able to enjoy it. We wouldn't see them, right? So darkness is actually not a thing. Light is a thing. Like I said, it can be measured. It is a thing. It moves. It has power in terms of heat and how distance that it can go. You turn on a light in this room, even if that light is not bright enough to light up this whole room, guess what that light tries to do? It tries to fill as much of this room as it possibly can. It reaches out as far as it possibly can go, even if it's not quite powerful enough to light up the whole room. So darkness, on the other hand, is not a thing. It's simply the absence of light. And so you think about God, and you think about us as Christians. God, of course, is the light that brings wisdom. God is the light that lets us see the beautiful things that there are here, the beauty in other people, the beauty in the things that we are able to create, and the beauty, of course, in His own creation, right? He is the light that brings us wisdom also to the dangers that are around us. If you're walking in the dark, why do people get so afraid of the dark? It's because they can't see what's in the dark, right? It's not necessarily the darkness that anybody's afraid of, but it's the anxiety and the worry and the fear of, I don't know what's around me, and if I need to react to preserve myself, I may not be able to react in time because I may not have a warning. I can't see what is around me, right? And so God's light, of course, brings that wisdom into our lives on a spiritual level as well. And we are to do that for the people that don't know God. And it's not that we carry a light of ourselves, but it's that we are a reflection of the light that was given to us, right? And so that's the main lesson there that I wanted to talk about today, is being salt and light and how that is our role as Christians. We're all a role player, every single one of us. Now, our roles may look different, but our ultimate goal is still going to be the same. Even if you're a preacher, teacher, singer, a prayer warrior, a person that comes down here and sets up the church, cleans the church, whatever it might be, keeper of the finances and the books, all of it, while separate, still has the ultimate end goal, and that's being salt and doing all the things that salt is and what we're meant to be for the people around us. And it doesn't go for just sinners that we know either. This is for the body of the church, right? The church body as well. We are to be that role for each and every person that walks through these doors. And we are to be the light as well. The light that allows people to see and to bring wisdom. Not our wisdom. How many of us have wisdom that we gained all on our own? All of our wisdom that we have gained is through either someone else, the Holy Spirit, of course, or just living life and making mistakes, right? And so that wisdom can be a light to others, okay? That can be what other people need in their life to see that they're thirsty, to see the goodness and the beauty around them that God has put in their life. And so my hope is for all of us that we are this light and we are the salt that Jesus is asking us to be here in Matthew chapter 5. So that's my lesson for today. Again, we've got a lot of time left, so we're going to try and play a little game here. Who on this team is tired? The ones that had to do the most passing, right? Connor, are you getting tired? Were you getting tired? Connor could have won, right? That was a possibility, okay? Sometimes, if you're that talented, you can overcome a lot of things, right? But at the end of the day, how tired would he have been if he would have had to keep doing that for 12 shots, for 16 shots, for 18 shots? We would have eventually found a number that Connor could not get to because he just physically would have worn down. This team would have been fine because most of them were not having to move at all, right? Just simply passing it back and forth and then taking the shot. So, of course, that was to show a little bit of the importance of teamwork. It also shows that just because you're a role player doesn't automatically mean that you're you're going to be better than the other ones, right? Because you got to be a good role player to be a part of the team as well, right? You've got to be able to fulfill your job, fulfill your role. And so that was just a little thing for us there to illustrate that. And so, again, we got a lot of extra time for tonight, but just to go back over some of the things that I mentioned there, be the salt, right? Be the salt. Be the light, okay? Enhance flavor. Enhance people's lives around you. Be something that when your presence is there, it's felt. And when you're not there, it's felt. Not because of us, right? As I mentioned earlier, it's not because of me. It's not for my glory, right? But it's because of the light that's within me. If I let that light shine and I let the things that the Holy Spirit has done in my life to shine out, I'm going to enhance flavor. I'm going to reduce bitterness. I'm going to be an antiseptic. I'm going to be a preservative, right? I'm going to season my words with salt, and I'm going to bring life to the moments that need life. I'm going to bring joy to the moments that need joy. Again, not the life that I'm bringing or the joy that I'm bringing, but the life that was given to me, right? And the joy that was given to me. And then the same with the light. Be what makes things around us beautiful, right? Again, I don't make any of this stuff beautiful, but somebody had to come down here and put it all up, right? Somebody had to come down here and arrange it and make it look nice and look good, okay? So even though I can still see the beauty, but I can also see the hand behind it that had to do something to get it there, right? The same with food. When I show up down there at the gym and there's all this nice, wonderful food out there, guess what? Somebody had to work to get that food there, right? Somebody had to prepare that. Somebody had to get that there. And so being that person that provides that light in the moments where beauty can be seen, right? When bringing wisdom in moments when wisdom is needed, okay? And so basically be a role player. None of us are the superstar on this team. I hate to break it to you. Connor, you're a pretty good superstar, buddy. But on this team, there is only one superstar, and that's God, right? That's Jesus. We're all the role players, okay? Every single one of us, we might have different roles, but we're still a role player. And we have a very specific role. Again, no matter how we get there, the end goal is still to be the salt, to be the light. So thank y'all for coming tonight and joining in. They're going to be back there for a little bit longer. Quite a bit longer, so we can kind of mingle, do whatever we want, but we're not dismissed yet. They are going to come out. We are going to do a group dismissal, okay, like we did last night. So, of course, if you don't have any kids here, you're free to go, do whatever you want, but if you do have kids that are here or you just want to hang out with us, please do so, but when they start coming back out, Brittany will get back up here. She'll end the night with some more fun stuff for us, and then we'll be coming back tomorrow night.